Hi, this is Carmen, Rosa. I've been with the CTN for many years and working with you guys in the network forever, since 1999. For those of you that don't know me, I have been working with many of the CTNers in writing policies and procedures, and today we will be presenting you a little overview of the recent updates. Dee?
Thank you, Carmen. Hi, everyone. My name is Dee Blumberg, and I'm the project manager for the NIDA Clinical Coordinating Center, the CCC, at the Emmes Corporation. I've been working here for about 5 years now, and so I know many of you, but I'm looking forward to working with some of our new teams, and I'm hoping that this presentation is really relevant for everyone. Thank you.
So today we will be presenting the CTN, mostly the CTN Investigator Toolbox. So our learning objective is to identify the location of these documents, the policies and procedures, the bylaws, and the toolbox, describe the structure and some of the main tools and documents that are within each section of the toolbox, and understand the ways in which the toolbox can be used as a resource for those of you involved in developing, implementing, and maintaining not just the clinical trials, but all the projects that are done in the CTN. So before we start, I just want to ask a couple of questions. Basically, do you know or have you read the policies and procedures? Did you know we have this document, or have you read it? I think you can click on yes or no. Okay. It looks like slightly majority of you do know that the document exists or have read it. So this will be great news for the other 40% that have not read it, and good news for the 60% to hear about the updates. So the other question is basically the same. As an Investigator Toolbox, or have you used it? Okay, so we have an almost 50-50 split here. So this webinar should be very useful to you in terms of going through the Investigator Toolbox and going through some of these features. Next. Just wanted to briefly let you know before we go to the toolbox that the toolbox originates and was developed after we took all the details from our policies and procedures. So we do have a document. Now it's version 6 that has been recently updated that mostly describe what people must abide to. Just wanted to note that it's not inclusive of everything. It's just provide highlights of the many federal policies from NIH, from FDA, from OHRP. So it only provides just highlights. All of you should be familiar with everything that needs to be, that you need to know for implementing the protocols. We also have bylaws. And again, these bylaws and procedures have been in the CTN from the time we started. Both of them are in the TPR. Well, all the documents are in the TPR website. The new bylaws have been updated and includes the new definitions and the new CTN structure as described in the RFA, which is we're giving you the link here for your information. All of these documents changes are based on this RFA. Just quickly to show you that these documents are located in the TPR website, and all of them are located under the CTN Documents tab. And I believe Dee is going to continue to talk about the toolbox.
Thank you, Carmen. Great. So now we can really go into some of the technical sides and features of the toolbox itself. What this really does, so the Investigator Toolbox really elaborates, as Carmen was saying, about different sections of the policies and procedures. So things that are mentioned there, like the COC, for example, the Certificate of Confidentiality, is detailed in much kind of larger form, and how to do it, how do you apply, who do you send it to, in the toolbox. The website is dynamic. We continue to put in new documents and resources as we think of them. We're always open to hearing from others what kind of things they'd like to see, because again, this is really a resource for you all. The CTN Toolbox is designed to provide instruction and guidance to both new and experienced investigators, and really to everyone else that is involved with CTN studies, whether it be the various site staff, node staff, and anyone that's involved in these trials. The toolbox provides templates and examples for key study documents. It provides instructions and guidance on processes that really have to do with the full scope, from developing to implementing and finally publishing and disseminating the results from a clinical trial. So for example, if you had an IND study and you needed to submit FDA Form 1572, in order to assist with that, we've put both a template that you can pull from the toolbox, and we've also put an example of a filled out 1572 that you can take a look at to see how another team has filled it out. Carmen has showed you the location, so this is the location of the toolbox, but one small note that I wanted to mention is that the TPR website will be changing, so it will look different. It won't look like you're seeing it here. It's going to appear slightly different, but the content is going to be the same. This is how it looks right now. This is how the site looks right now. And under documents, we've kind of divided the sections into a chronological order of a clinical study. So from concept through to development, pre-implementation, implementation, and study termination. And within these sections are guidances, templates, and other documents that can help for that particular phase of a study. What I'd like to do now is go through each of these phases, show you briefly what we have in there so that you can kind of see which sections are interesting to you and have an idea of where you might want to start looking for these resources. So starting with the protocol concept area, there are three tools or documents that we have here. The first is an introduction to the idea of a protocol concept, a real summary of the process of submitting a concept. This was developed and provided to us by Dr. Dennis Donovan on behalf of the Research Development Committee. So it's very good to read this and make sure that you understand this if you're preparing to submit a concept. There's also the Design and Analysis Special Interest Group document that they put together on early phase trials in the CTN, also very informative for those that are thinking of developing studies. And finally, the RDC has provided us with a more detailed document explaining the concept submission process, the review process that they do, the procedures, their scoring, their method of scoring, and so on. And I can show you the first page of that just so you have an idea of how detailed some of these documents are. So you have here some guidances on the length, on the formatting, who it should be sent to. And further in the document, if you were interested and pulled this one, you could see additional information such as scoring. Moving on to the protocol development section, we have quite a few documents in this section, and really the NIDA CTN and the Clinical Coordinating Center have really tried to collect and develop these documents based on our experiences helping study teams. So finding the areas that have been confusing to people in the past. For example, this first item that we have here is the protocol template. So there have been a lot of questions about the protocol template in the past. We've tried to put together some standardized language in different sections of the protocol that you can use and customize for your own study. So things like that. Another example is the management of key study documents. So here we talk about how the Clinical Coordinating Center upversions and version controls the study documents like the protocol, the MOP, and how much time we need in order to do that. Who do you contact? What does the length of time have to do with, so the number of images you might have in a protocol and things like that. There is a document on the PRB/DSMB. There is some information on how to register a study on clinicaltrials.gov. So here, while the CCC doesn't do that, that's something that the node generally, the investigator and their team does. We've provided some information. Where do you go to? What website do you use? An example of a trial that's been posted on clinicaltrials.gov and so on. Important study responsibilities really outline what is a node, what is the CCTN, what is the Clinical Coordinating Center, how can we help you throughout a trial. So this one is particularly important to new teams that are starting, to some of our new nodes, and can really be helpful as you're kind of figuring out the CTN organization and how things work. And finally, and this might be one of our most important documents, is a very comprehensive document that talks about trial startup, the trial startup phase, everything that has to do with this phase of a study. Why is it important? Who are the main players that kind of are responsible for the tasks here? And then we've also provided 2 calculators that can help you as you plan your study. And I'll go through some of these to show you what they are. So the first thing I wanted to show, again, this is all documents that are pulled directly from the toolbox. The first one is the first page of the study responsibilities document. So you'll hear, if you're new to the CTN, you're going to hear a lot of acronyms. You're going to hear lead team, lead node, CCC, DSC, CCTN. So while you all probably know already the NIDA CTN, you might not be familiar with some of the other groups. So this document can be very helpful in really teasing apart these different groups and what are their main tasks and responsibilities, so that you know who you can contact when you need assistance in a specific area. I'd like to also show you one of the timeline calculators that we have in the toolbox. Again, this was really a set of tools that were added that involve kind of an explanation of the different tasks, or indication of a different tasks that are necessary throughout the trial, and the length of time that is generally appropriate and required in order to fulfill that specific task. And we have this one that I'm showing you right now was developed by the NIDA CTN. There is another calculator that was developed by Dr. Teresa Windhusen from the CTN. Both are extremely helpful for planning and implementing a trial. So again, for both new studies and those of you that are already experienced in the CTN, this would really be a useful tool for everyone. The next section that I want to talk about in the toolbox is the pre-implementation section. And here we've kind of partitioned it into training, site selection, regulatory, and assessment. The training section is CTN specific, so it really talks about the training requirements that are relevant for the CTN trials. For example, what is a training plan? What do we mean when we say training plan? How do we document training in the CTN? So you have an example of a training plan. You'll have an example of a training documentation form. These are things that you'll have and will have in every protocol, and can be very helpful when you're preparing for protocol training. We also have links there to cross-protocol training, so things like the GCP, HSP requirements, links to those, so those would be helpful too. For site selection, in that section, the CCC really was trying to develop a document to explain the process that's involved in site selection. This might be different than other organizations or studies that you were part of. We've also provided some examples. So while this kind of process is pretty flexible and different teams kind of do it slightly differently, there are certain best practices that we found. There's lessons learned, and there's some examples from other teams that have sat through this, thought through this, and have prepared meaningful methods of selecting sites. So scoring systems, for example, how would you rank one candidate site against another when you're trying to figure out what the best suited sites are for your trial? So things like that I think are very helpful too. For the regulatory section, this is a very big section of the toolbox, and I'll show you some of the documents or types of documents that we have. But we've put both forms, so the actual templates of forms that you'll need to submit for regulatory purposes, and then also samples or examples of forms that are already filled out. We also have a section on the COC, the Certificate of Confidentiality, and that includes a training session that we had by Nadine Rogers from NIDA, who presented and gave us some really good information that we've included there. So we've just attached her entire presentation for those who are interested. We have some information on binders, on the regulatory binders, and also a guideline for defining IRB involvement, and I'm going to show you that one in just a second. And finally, the last section is assessments, and here we've just put assessments that are common in the CTN trials, and we're working on updating this, so you're going to see some new things in there soon. So 2 examples from the regulatory document section. So the CCC has over 10 years of experience helping manage CTN trials, and we were trying to use that experience and identify lessons learned, questions that we've had many times in many studies, points of difficulty, and things like that. So for example here, often we get questions from sites where there might be some confusion between CLIA and CAPS for laboratories. So we decided to provide examples of both. We provided an example here of a CLIA document with some of the items redacted, and a CAP document. So this can be really useful especially for folks at a site that may not have had experience with these type of documents before. Another tool, this is something that the CCC created last year, and we really wanted to help sites identify what constitutes an IRB of record and what are the required documents for an IRB of record for the purposes of a CTN trial. So we got a few regulatory specialists together. We really went over the requirements and put them down in a very user-friendly, easy-to-use flowchart that can help when you're trying to figure out if you really have one IRB or 2 IRBs for the purpose of a specific study in the CTN. Now that said, and after all the work that we put into it, this might not be as helpful as we go into moving towards kind of having a single IRB. So you might expect to see in the next weeks and months another document that talks about a single IRB and what would their requirements be and some information about that. So again, this is a good example of how the website is designed to be dynamic and really change with the changes in the CTN and continue to kind of improve and change and add to the existing materials. The next section that I wanted to show you is about implementation. This is a relatively short section, and it's one that we'd really want to try to add to. So this would be a good place where the 50% of you that are experienced and know the toolbox and have run studies before might be able to help us think of some additional things to add. But one document that we have there, that first one, is about follow-up visits and off-site assessments. So these are some best practices that you might wish to use when you're planning to meet a participant not in the usual location, not in your usual clinic location. We also, the second document that we have there is something that the CCC developed, specifically a comprehensive checklist for site initiation. So that is a big part of that section where in the beginning of every trial, the sites are given a checklist that really is very comprehensive and detailed and gives information on everything that is expected for the site, from the site for the purposes of endorsement. So what regulatory documents do they need to have? What supplies have to be on site? Who are the personnel involved, the staff involved? Are their trainings complete? Is all the equipment necessary in place? Are all the SOPs been completed and reviewed? So it really is very detailed, and it's designed in a way that when the site fills this out and when it's close to completion, that's when we know to send our monitors in and to really have that site initiation visit. So that is a very useful document and one that we use in every site, in pretty much every study in the CTN, or a good majority of them. We also put some more information, for example, the endorsement checklist. And let me show you an example of both of these, one page from both of these documents. So the first document here is an example of the first page of the site readiness checklist. You can see that it's very specific, that it shows for every specific activity and task whether or not it has been completed, the date of completion, any comments that the site has. In the regulatory documents, we've provided the binder tab number where it should be placed in the site regulatory binder, whether it needs to be submitted to the clinical coordinating center, whether it needs to be sent to the lead node, and again, comments and dates. So this is a very useful document for the site. And this is the endorsement checklist that I wanted to show you. Many of you that have already had studies have seen this, probably more than once, so you know. But for others who are starting, it's nice to know who is expected to sign this form. So we often have questions about who the main signatures, who is required for signatures, and this way you can already see it's all in the toolbox. You have access to it at any time, and you can see who's going to be expected to sign, and the order of signatures that people often ask about as well. The final section that I wanted to review is the study termination section. And here we have a single document right now, and that is a document about final study report preparation. This is a document that was actually developed and posted by the DSC, by their PI, Paul van Veldhuizen, who really thought this could be a helpful guidance for study teams, for investigators and their teams who are trying to prepare an FSR at the end of a study. So it has some really good information, particularly about the executive summary piece. So you have very detailed information here that is definitely going to be a useful tool for those of you that are preparing an FSR. And that is really the last section in the toolbox, in that chronological order of the toolbox. Just to kind of summarize, so in the past 5 years that I've been in the CCC, and others before me, and of course the NIDA CTN, we've always really tried to leverage our experience across protocols, across studies, in our work with different teams to help pull some of the tools that could be helpful for new studies. We've tried to think through each phase of the study and put some documents, templates, tools that would be useful there. But what I really wanted to bring up as part of this discussion and presentation is that we'd love to add more materials and examples. We have a lot of new nodes right now. We have new sites always coming in, and we'd really love to put some tools that would help make the process as easy as possible. and also just kind of exchanging information between study teams. So I know from the things that I've experienced when I was a protocol specialist on studies, back to my days with CURB with a 48 study, and even hearing from monitors that are going on current studies, that when they go to sites, they often see kind of tools that a site has developed for its own use. For example, a process of how to go through different procedures, or maybe biomeasure sample collection, or things like that, things that they found on their own that are difficult or confusing at the site, and they found a way to make it easier. So those are the type of things that we would really be interested in hearing about, and if you feel comfortable with, we would really love to share those on the toolbox. So this is really a resource for all of you, for all of us at the CTN, and we want to make it as useful as possible. We are really interested in feedback. So I think already it's a very good resource. I encourage the 48% that haven't heard about it or viewed it before to really go in there and look at some of the documents that we have. And then for all of you, both new and experienced sites, to maybe share either things that you have that you've developed, or just ideas for things that you think would be useful, could be a useful addition to what we already have. So I'd like to open it up now for a few minutes of discussion. I would be really interested to hear feedback from you all. For those that have used it, maybe if you could say a few words about what you found useful, or what you see as room for improvement, things that you already have kind of thinking about that we may want to change. For new folks, if this was clear, if there are any sections that are not clear, anything that you can think of that would help you or would have helped you in the earlier stages of your kind of trial development or implementation. So Carolyn, could we unmute the lines for a little and see if anyone wants to tell us a little about their experiences?
Can we ask questions at this point, or just sharing experiences?
No, of course, you can ask questions. Yeah.
This is Kathy Bradley in Seattle. We realize as you go through this that we really need our entire team on this, and it's not clear to me how. I know I got hooked up on it when we were in the steering committee meeting, but how would we go about getting everybody added so they could actually access this toolbox?
Very good question, and I should have gone over this. Let me move to the slide that shows the location. So the Investigator Toolbox, and also the other resources that Carmen mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, are all part of the TPR website. The TPR website is here. You can see the URL, ctndst2.com. And what you need in order to have access to the TPR in general, and to the toolbox in particular, is to fill out the staff information form. This is something that you may have already done. Any new study, all the people that are involved in any new study have to fill out the staff information form. This is something that the DSC will send to you if they haven't already, but I can make sure to send it to you specifically, and anyone else who tells me on the call that they need it. You fill out that staff information form for every person in your staff, and later on will be in the study. And that form has a section that asks if you want to have access to the TPR. So you would just mark it as yes. And I recommend that everyone that is affiliated with CTN trials in any way ask for access to the TPR. This is a very helpful website, specifically the Investigator Toolbox that we're talking about right now, but also it has a lot of other things that you're going to want as you prepare for the trial. So Kathy, I'll send that to you. You can also, for anyone that's on the call, you can also email the DSC help desk. So, and you can, and there's a button at the bottom of that form. If you look at the slide that I'm on now, at the bottom of that slide, it says, it has the NIDA DSC help desk at NIDA-DSC2help@emmes.com. You can also email them directly. Oh, thank you for Caroline, or whoever's putting that arrow, that green arrow there.
Thank you, Dee. Eve Gelstrom had a comment to go to exactly where you indicated. The email address is right there. Again, here's my little green arrow at the bottom of the screen to request the help form and to submit it. There's a button at the bottom of the email.
Thank you. Were there any other questions or anyone that wanted to share anything about their experiences with the toolbox or just things that as I went through the slides they were thinking might be useful?
No, this is Carmen. Just wanted to let everybody know. I know that we have a few studies that are in the process of being developed, and several of the new nodes are working on those. I hope that, like Kathy Bradley is in the call, that other teams are as well. And if they, I don't want you to feel shy asking questions and telling us if you need something that you don't see here, because we should be able to provide you with all the help you need in going through the process. We have gone through the process of developing protocols for many, many years, and we always felt that it would have been better to do this other way. So any suggestions that you have will be great. This processes applies to pretty much every study. Some of the big studies, all of the big studies, but also the small studies. For the small studies, if you have questions because you don't think your information is here, or it may not apply because, for example, your small study is collecting data for participants and it's not going into a set or something like that, but if you still have questions, let us know.
Yeah, and I should say that many of these documents that were developed were based on questions that we got from sites, from investigators as they were starting studies or throughout the implementation phase. So people ask questions, and we always think, that's really good. We should put it out there. We should develop something, some tool, because if one person is asking, there must be 10 others that would really like that information as well. So that's something to think about as you're all starting trials or throughout the life of a trial, that anything that is not quite clear or you feel that you can use more information on would be helping us so that we know what we can provide, and would be helping other teams because they more than likely have similar questions they're thinking of. Okay, so I think that was it. I didn't want to go into too much detail. I really wanted you just to get a sense of what is there so that you can really go on your own and look through and find the things that are interesting and relevant to you. And one last thing, Caroline, I'm going to go back just to one slide here just to show that we do have an email that goes to myself and several other people here at the Clinical Coordinating Center, where we can either answer your questions about navigating the site itself or get any feedback that you may have about the toolbox or adding or changing and things like that. So feel free to email that email or email me directly or call me at any time. We're really interested in pushing, in putting some real effort to keep improving this website so it can continue to be a good resource for everyone. So thank you, and Caroline, I'll let you keep going right here.
Great. Thank you, Dee and Carmen. Wonderful presentation. I wanted to let everyone know that the recording of this presentation will be available electronically 10 to 14 days or so on the CTN Dissemination Library website, which will be available to you and everyone that's attended today to review and hopefully give us some ideas and feedback and utilize the website. Please join us for our next webinar, Wednesday, May 25th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, where we'll present the CTN 0044 Web TX, a review of the primary and secondary outcomes. So again, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to our presenters for a great presentation, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.